Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Grace Ma. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. People will have to use the LeaveHomeSafe app to enter restaurants and many other venues from December 9th. A visit by Mainland experts paves the way for another senior-level meeting on reopening the border. And former student activist Tony Chung is jailed for secession and money laundering. If you head out next month, you had better get your mobile phone ready. That's because the government is expanding the use of the LeaveHomeSafe app to tens of thousands of premises from December 9th. Apart from restaurants, those who enter gyms, hotels, karaoke, and beauty parlors must use the app to record their visits. Hours after the chief executive confirmed that the use of the LeaveHomeSafe app will be required at more places, the Food and Health Bureau made it official with a press release this evening. But instead of Thursday, as most sources had suggested, the new rules will take effect in a fortnight. From December 9th, diners at all types of restaurants must record their visit with LeaveHomeSafe, meaning paper forms will no longer be provided. But the press release did not specify whether restrictions on Type A and B eateries, such as the capacity limit and operating hours, will be relaxed. Use of the app is also mandatory at all premises bound by the Prevention and Control of Disease regulation. These include gyms, swimming pools, hotels, entertainment venues, as well as beauty and massage parlors. Most current social distancing measures, meanwhile, will be extended for 2 weeks when they expire tomorrow. But from next month, cruises can operate at 75% capacity, up from 50%. There's light at the end of the tunnel for those longing to visit the mainland without undergoing quarantine. A 4-day inspection by Mainland experts of Hong Kong's anti-COVID measures has helped pave the way for the next high-level meeting on reopening the border. Annie Lau reports.
On the fourth and final day of their check on COVID control measures in Hong Kong, a group of Mainland experts visited a private clinic in Heng Fa Tsuen. Accompanied by Cheung Sok Kwan, the city's head of communicable disease, they observed the clinic's vaccination arrangement. Some went to a pharmacy in Quarry Bay. The delegation also travelled to Siu Sai Wan for a first-hand look at a secondary school's anti-epidemic measures. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the experts' visit was a key step towards the gradual resumption of cross-border travel. Speaking ahead of her cabinet's meeting, Lam said the Mainland team had toured quarantine facilities and learned how contact tracing was carried out. This paved the way for another top-level meeting on reopening the frontier. Hong Kong delegates, headed by Chief Secretary John Lee, will meet their Mainland counterparts in Shenzhen on Thursday, Lam said. Their last face-to-face discussions on the issue were about 2 months ago. The Chief Executive urged people to get vaccinated, saying a high inoculation rate will help reopen the border. Looking ahead, she said authorities will introduce a quota system and a mechanism to suspend quarantine-free travel in case of an outbreak on either side of the border. Annie Lau, HKIBC.
Former student activist Tony Chung has been jailed for 3 years and 7 months for secession and money laundering. He's the youngest person convicted under the national security law. Alman Lee reports.
Tony Chung sat in the dock in the district court during mitigation. The former leader of the disbanded pro-independence group Student Localism had earlier pleaded guilty to secession and 1 count of money laundering. Lawyer Edwin Choi cited a letter from Chung's mother, saying he came from a broken family and had an unhappy childhood because of his parents' divorce. Chung was described as a filial son. Choi said the 20-year-old had no actual plan to separate Hong Kong from China, adding he had a clear record before his arrest. But Judge Stanley Chan said Chung had been detained for desecrating the national flag before and committed the secession offense while on bail. As for money laundering, Choi argued the $135,000 involved was rather small and pleaded for leniency. He said the money was to keep student localism running and not for Chung's personal use. Handing down sentence, Judge Chen said the defendant founded student localism and actively promoted Hong Kong independence. Chung managed the group's social media accounts and set up a PayPal account for donations. Chen said student localism claimed to have ceased operations before the national security law was enacted in June 2020, but its social media pages remained active for recruitment and crowdfunding. The group established a U.S. division and continued to advocate for independence, and Chung managed its social media accounts. The judge said he believed Chung would continue his activities had he not been arrested. He sentenced Chung to 3 years and 7 months in prison after taking his guilty plea into account. Chung is the third person and the youngest one so far to be sentenced under the national security law. The student was only 19 years old at the time of his arrest. Ahmed Lee, HKIBC.
A coroner has returned a verdict of death by misadventure in the case of a baby who was delivered by the vacuum extraction procedure 5 years ago. A number of proposals were made to help prevent a repeat. Jan Xuet Lam was born in the United Christian Hospital in Kwun Tong on January 30th, 2016. The vacuum extraction procedure was employed 4 times during her delivery. 8 days later, she died after a hemorrhage in her head. At the end of a 7-day hearing in which 13 witnesses testified, the coroner, sitting without a jury, returned a verdict of death by misadventure. Coroner Ho Chen-yu ruled that the baby died of brain dysfunction, pulmonary hemorrhage, and acute renal failure. The obstetrician might have made a misjudgment on how the fetus was positioned. The vacuum might have been placed on a more frontal area of the fetus' head, which increased the risk of hemorrhage and organ failure. Ho suggested that medics carrying out vacuum extraction should use ultrasound when in doubt about the position of the fetus' head. The coroner said a massive transfusion protocol is the remedy for the type of brain hemorrhage the baby suffered, and it should be regulated in hospitals so treatments can be expedited. Doctors should also detail the risks in assisted births where suction is used. The information should be presented in fact sheets so pregnant women will know that complications might arise from the procedure. The MTR Corporation is extending its fare concession with a 3.8% rebate for each trip. This means fares will remain the same until June next year. The scheme was supposed to expire in January, and fares would have risen were it not for the extension. The railway operator refuted allegations that it decided on the extension to appease the public following rumors that the concession would be axed. It said it will use an additional $200 million for the scheme. The company added it is still struggling with operational costs, but patronage has rebounded.
We believe it's due to the more relaxation in social restrictions in the past couple of months. Some of the work from home arrangements that have been implemented earlier in the year, we believe have been back to normal for most of the companies. And of course, schools are reopened. More students are going back physically to schools, and all this have accounted for the rise in the domestic patronage.
14 people have been arrested for alleged money laundering involving $380 million. Police also seized bank cards, phones, and laptops. The suspects are accused of persuading the victims, including their own relatives, to set up more than 60 bank accounts for laundering ill-gotten gains. The money was obtained through online romance and investment scams. Polling booths will be set up at border control points that are currently closed to allow Hong Kongers living on the mainland to vote in next month's Legislative Council elections. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said eligible voters need to register in advance and say which checkpoints they plan to use. They will not be quarantined when they return to the mainland after voting. Lam denied that the one-off arrangement is aimed at boosting the voting rates. She also warned against calls to cast blank ballots.
I think where it refers to casting blank vote or prohibiting or persuading people not to vote. There is a certain lead-in, that is, it probably takes a form of an public activities trying to incite voters to do this sort of activities. Let's be very clear and certain about it, because Hong Kong is very proud of our rule of law, and our legislation is very often very clearly drafted in order to ensure that we will implement the law in a fair and just manner.
And coming up after the break. Questions are asked after Boris Johnson dwells on Peppa Pig in wandering speech to business elites.